Hey guys, I thought I'd do a video in response to Emily's library books versus buying books, and so I'm going to give you my opinion on each. And I've written a list down, and it is pretty late at night, so I'm a bit tired, but I've actually been thinking about this today, so it's kind of weird, but good. So, okay, I am the kind of person who tells myself that I have way more than enough books in my room behind me to last me a lifetime, which is very true, and that I should not go to the library because people don't have a lot of books, and in some, I'm not going to sound so snobbish, it's probably going to come across as snobbish, but I have books, so I feel guilty when I borrow books from the library because other people may not have books, and other people may want to read those kind of books, and I've got something to read already, so I have a lot of mixed opinions on books and book buying. But the pros that I came up with for libraries, like using the libraries, are of course that they're free, which is something that I used to use a lot as a teenager and as a child because my parents didn't have a great deal of money. We had $5 here and there. I might have bought a book or two a year, but mostly we were encouraged to use the library, and we did, and that is something that I have loved all my life, and probably a reason why I love the library still, because I just love going to the library. I love the library sometimes even more than bookshops, because I feel like bookshops can sometimes be so overcrowded, and physical bookshops, and especially in the city, and there's too many people and you can't really browse for a long time like you can in the library. Now, nowadays a lot more actual bookshops have like seating places, coffee houses and things where you can sit down and read the book or magazine. But I find it more comforting to actually be sitting in a library rather than a bookshop, because there's not so many people, and usually people are there just to go in and out, and yeah. The only problem with that, with my library, is that my library is actually connected to a high school, which is, I think, a couple of blocks away. So you have to be really picky about what time you go there, otherwise it is full of students. And I was a student once too, but when you are trying to look for books and there's 10-20 students sitting around in a circle laughing and giggling and not really looking for anything and blocking up the hallways, you kind of learn to go early in the morning. So that is one downside of the library, sometimes it being too stacked, just like a bookshop. I like the try before you buy system, which something was kind of iffy for me. I had to cut out my impulse buying and spending habits mostly this year because I had a decrease in income, which is still decreasing, but I had to do that, and so I've learned to be a bit more frugal with my money and what I spend my money on. So I like to try before I buy it, if I can. I usually go to the library, look up an author, especially if it's a book that I've heard a lot of things about too. I see if it's there, if I can get a hold, if I can't. My library doesn't have a great selection, but I usually do that. And so that works pretty fine, because it means that I can have a bit of a taste for a novel or non-fiction book, and if I really like it, I can go and buy it later on. And usually by that time, which is a pro, it's already actually cheaper. They do have more selection than a bookshop sometimes, but since I do a lot of online book shopping, that's not really a problem with the library. I also love the experience and the community aspect of going to a library. Especially my old library in the town I used to go to. I used to volunteer there, and I also participated in monthly book club books where we would get together and we would talk about all the books that we read during the month, and we'd write up a list. And most of the books that were circulating through the book club actually were in the library, because a lot of the people in the book club were older women and men who were in retirement age and who preferred that community aspect and liked to toss around books and swap, and I really love that kind of aspect of going to the library, and I'm trying to search for that in my area now. there's something so fulfilling about reading a book and hearing about it and then sitting around a table drinking coffee or tea and swapping them and spinning them around and offering, like, you know, new authors, and being able to just walk outside of that room, go to a shelf, pick it up and borrow that book. And I really miss that about going to libraries. So that can be a pro and a con for me. My cons really are the short loaning time. A lot of the time you'll see me have a huge stack of library books that I hardly get to. I'm a very moody reader. One day I might want to read something about a serial killer, the next day I might want to read about someone skipping in a field of roses. So sometimes it takes me a lot longer to actually get into a book, and by the time I have gotten to a book, I want to read something else, or I have to take them back to the library, and I really do not like that about library books. But that's what happens with library books. But it is a con for me because sometimes I can spend a month reading a book, sometimes I can spend 2 days reading a book. The conditions of the book, sometimes I've had some where there has been snot in the pages, where the pages have been watermarked, damaged, ruffled up. I do love a good book that is used, and I love that feeling of borrowing a book from the library that is used, but there is a difference between used and snotted all over, and yeah, not something I really like taking home with me. Especially when the snot is flaky and it falls out of the book. Language barriers as well, and lack of resources. In where I live right now, the cons of being in this area is that there are a lot of different cultures that come in and out of the library, as opposed to when I used to live in the country, so it's very hard for me to stand against those language barriers, or break through them rather, and a lot of the librarians have different ethnicities, cultures, which I'm very accepting of, guys, but it's just hard sometimes to get my message through and be very clear. So, and when I go to the library, I kind of like to have things clear, if that makes sense. So, that is library books, and here are my pros and cons for buying. You have more options when you buy books, from covers to type, to size, to the quality of the paper and hardback jacket and things like that. You get to control that buying experience as opposed to the library experience and them buying a book for you or for everyone to read. I like to feel my books, and I do a lot of my shopping online, like I said, but there are some books that I have learned from experience and from actually picking them up in the library that I need to feel them first before I buy them. If there's something like Melissa de la Cruz or Twilight or something like that, I kind of have an idea of what the size and weight of the book's going to be. But for something more science fiction fantasy, sometimes I can get caught in the trap of spending $20 on a book that is way too heavy for me to hold, and I just can't do it. So I like the idea of being able to control my buying experience. I love the feeling of owning books. I'm a collector. I may be a hoarder, but I love every minute of it. And there is something so satisfying about going into my book room and seeing, like, literally a whole room of books. It is comforting, and I like I said, I love the experience. And it's kind of like having my own library inside the house. So on the off chance that I'm sick, or there's nothing at the library I feel like reading, or if there's been some books that I'm really passionate about reading and I haven't got to for a while, I can go into my room and I can pick a few off the shelf, which gives me the kind of experience of a library, and I can take them into my room and I can spend months reading them. I don't have any limitation. I guess, well, up until I found YouTube, there wasn't really a sense of community. So now that I have found YouTube, there is a sense of community. However, I'm kind of going with the downsides and pros and cons mixed together. There is some issues that I have had with YouTubing and book blogging and blogging, that in the fact that, especially when I was starting out, I was impulsively buying shitloads of books because the more I heard about a book, the more I had to have it. And I know a lot of people went through this as well, and probably are still going through it to some degree. So, in regards to buying books, I've cut back and had to really ask the question, do I need this book? Do I want it? Are they one of my favourite authors? Have I read it from the library and loved it? Has it been recommended to me by someone that I have previously read books or read book recommendations through and enjoyed? Yeah, because a lot of the time I have bought books and I like them, and I have spent, like, I honestly pay pretty much full price for my books. So a lot of the time I spend upwards of $30, and $30 is a lot to pay for a book. So nowadays I've had to kind of cut back, and yeah, so YouTube is a wonderful place. I love you guys so much, but I think it's a learning experience as well, especially when you first get on. You're just like, books, 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 I must get all these books, because part of you wants to fit into the crowd as well. Part of you just loves books. Part of you is like, oh my god, there's so many books, I have to get all of them, I want to read all the things. I think when you start buying books too, you learn that you have to kind of balance that impulsiveness with practicality and readability as well. And that's something I struggle with a lot. But from cutting back, I've found that I've had more time for the books that I own. And I go to the library less, because I actually go into my room and really appreciate my books as well. A good thing about having your own books is that you can reread them, you can dog-ear them, and you can mark them. I don't really tend to do that, but I do tend to post-it note my books as well. And I love having my own books, because if I am having a bad day, or if I'm reading something and I remember something and I want to go back and write it down or reread it and talk about it with my journal, I can. Whereas if I do that and I have to take the library book back, I kind of don't have that same experience of flicking through the pages, smelling the book, having that kind of wholesome experience that you get from books as well. The cost, it's horrid, really. And another con about buying books is that this stupid, annoying thing of them changing covers halfway through a freaking series. Across the universe, I have seen the third book in the series. I'm so freaking peed off that they changed the last cover and they haven't made anything to go with the first two covers, which are stunning, by the way. And same with, I think, the Kimberly Durding Bonnie Finder series. I'm hoping that I can find a copy of Last Echo with the original covers. Otherwise, I'm not even sure I'm going to buy it, because as a book collector and as a book lover and as someone who really is quite aesthetic when it comes to books, don't fuck me over, guys. In the publishing industry, I'm not going to spend my money if you screw me over when it comes to covers. I am a bit pedantic like that. So, yeah. So that is my opinion on that. Yeah, really, that's pretty much my pros and cons. They're a little bit mixed up together because I'm a little bit tired, but I hope I got my message across. Buying books versus library books. Sorry guys, but buying books is always going to win for me. I love having my own books, but I also love the library. But if I had to choose, I would probably spend my time reading the books that I already have, because again, there are a lot of people out there who can't afford books, and a lot of people who are requesting certain books as well, and I don't want to take away that experience, and I think it is an experience that everyone needs to go through as well, borrowing books from the library. Even if you can afford books, I do think it's a good thing to support your local library at times. I think that's pretty much why I keep going back to my local library, because I like supporting them, I like supporting the community. And sometimes I may find a little secret gem, just like when you go to a bookshop and there's things for sale, or, you know, I love that experience in both libraries and book buying too, when you can go into a library or bookshop and find something that you've never heard of before. And it's actually most often those books that end up being on my shelf and being reread so many times. So, I would show you a classic example, but they're all in my room and I can't be bothered getting it, but One example is my copy of Frankie Saves Relapse, which I have shown you guys plenty of times. Yeah. $5, book I never heard about, book I have read so many times I actually had to go and buy myself a second copy, which I found for $2 as well. So, brilliant book. So yeah, okay, I'm gonna go upload this video, and I hope you guys are having a fantastic night, and I shall talk to you guys later. Bye.